Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Ben Catley-Richardson, also known as the Accountability Viking. Ben is the founder of Get Shit Done and Have More Fun, an agency coaching business for founders who want to stop sacrificing their sanity. Not only does he have some great methods and systems to make this happen, but many of the ideas are led through studies in neuroscience. And so it moves these ideas out of theory and into proven application. In this episode, we discuss how to make tough decisions that create more free time, the importance of the 5 gates of learning, ways to increase clarity to overcome overwhelm and procrastination, and more. Today's episode is brought to you by ZenPilot. There are lots of tools out there for agencies to manage projects, but any project issues aren't usually caused by the tool, they're from your own processes. ZenPilot helps agencies implement their project management tools while streamlining operations, so your team can move from chaos to clarity. You can see for yourself at zenpilot.com/forward. And now, Ben, the Accountability Viking. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. How can agency founders get more free time back in their lives?
Do you want the easy answer, Chris, or do you want the tough but more realistic answer?
I will always go for the tough and more realistic answer because I'm a glutton for punishment, but we can try the easy answer after.
Yeah, we'll go back to that. Like the real answer, the tough answer is you just have to make the tough decisions. You have to sacrifice what is not getting you somewhere. You have to get rid of all the stuff that's irrelevant, that's not actually helping. And you have to really, you have to make everything that you do essentially fight to the death. So you need to be able to look at all of your tasks and know that every single one of them makes a completely valuable contribution to where you're trying to get to. If you see that you're doing something because other people do it, or you're doing something because, well, you feel like you should, or because you've always done it, those are usually the tasks, the commitments, the behaviors that are holding you back. And if you think that you can get rid of, 20% of the stuff that actually takes up your time, you are then going to have that to put into the stuff that can really move you forwards. Now, the difficulty here is obviously you've got to make those sacrifices, you've got to make those tough choices. But in order to do that, you need a guiding principle or a priority. You need a way where every time you look at a task or a commitment or even a decision, you can already have in the back of your mind a filter, a way of looking at it, a way of turning it from a very difficult to kind of grapple with, or maybe, big picture conversation that you're having with yourself, to just turn it into a yes or no, to turn it into a binary, to turn it into something you can actually make a decision about instantly. And if you can have that priority, that single priority that really drives forward everything you do, 2 things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to make more progress because you're actually going to be doubling down on the stuff that really takes you forward. And the second thing is, if you make more progress, if you achieve more and get there faster, you will naturally feel better about taking time off. And so ultimately, it's not so much about creating time off because, we can't create time. That's just way beyond our abilities. But what we can do is try and get the most important stuff done with our time so that we feel comfortable and no guilt about it, actually deciding to take the downtime.
Right. So I guess the real challenge then comes in, how do you prioritize? How do you find that one thing? What is that big domino that you need to knock down?
Yeah, and I think this is kind of circling back to the easy answer. The easy answer is get a job, because then somebody else will tell you what to do, right?
Right.
But we don't want to do that. That's not what we want to do. It's going to go against everything that we're trying to achieve. And also, as I'm sure you'd agree, it's not the way that we actually achieve the unlocking of the life that we really want. We want something bigger. We don't just want to be in employment. So if we're not going to go for that easy answer, And to kind of look at what you were just saying, finding that priority, we have to then figure out, okay, if we were employed, it would be easy because someone would just tell us, they would give us that priority. Mm-hmm. So we almost have to take our head in two different directions. Have the decision-making process, go through the planning, the thinking, the long-term ideas, so that person can have made all the decisions and leave you behind the guidance, the plan, the priority. So in the moment, you're almost a different person. You're not making those decisions. Mm-hmm. And the only real way that you can find that priority is by kind of going back between those elements. I've never learned anything worthwhile that I didn't fully commit to when I was trying to find it out. So if you're going to find out a priority, you're never going to find it out in the room, behind closed doors. You've got to say, this feels like the right thing to do. This feels like a priority that I can really double down on, and then go out and do it. And if in a week's time you go, it's not working, you still know more than you did a week ago. You still got further towards where you want to be than you were a week ago. And that's the mindset you've really got to get in, I think, is, if you're trying to find the priority, you won't find it until you start running with something. It's like anything in business, isn't it? You just cannot learn until you're out there. And then, what's the Mike Tyson quote? You got to get basically punched in the face. You've got to get your plan out there and then get punched in the face and adapt to it. And that's the only way, really, I think.
Yeah, we had a variant of that saying in the Army, which was the enemy gets the vote. And so it doesn't matter what plan you make, right? The enemy gets to throw their own thinking into this. So I don't know how much I want to get into all the different like productivity tips and tricks, right? Like I think the mindset is probably the more important thing. But something that I've been doing every week is just planning it, or really it's every month I pick up like, what are the 3 big things I need to knock out? Knowing that I can't continuously make progress on one goal all of the time, but I'll have 2 others that I can keep kind of fitting in. And then each week it's like, okay, what is that one thing I need to do in order to advance my monthly goal? Is that getting too deprioritized? Or I guess, is that a structure that you would say is something agencies could start doing in order to get into being even more focused?
Well, the immediate question to go through there is having 3 things on the go is not a problem, right? Because this is where we can kind of get confused as well. We talk about competing priorities, and we often really mean competing tasks or commitments. That's not kind of what a priority sits as when you're trying to use this plan. The idea is that the priority is what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to get to, or ultimately, what's the blocker that stops you having what you want? And then obviously the priority is to remove that blocker. So the first thing I'd be doing is saying, okay, Chris, you've got those 3 things you're looking for every month, but what are they serving? Like, why those 3 things? Why did you choose those 3 things? And where did they take you?
Right. And I guess they would all fall into like the constraint of my business, and just 3 ways to kind of tackle it from the different angles that aren't necessarily competing, but are support each other. Although I don't think I've actually spent that much time thinking through that, right? Not deliberate.
That's the point, right? And a lot of it, so there's a book called Essentialism. Forgive me, I can't remember the guy who wrote it. Really, really
Greg
good book.
McKeown.
And one of
them, that was my most gifted book for a couple years in a row.
Yeah. And the whole thing is brilliant, right? But one of the things I loved most was he had this conversation about, I believe it was interviewing people, but you can use it obviously in everything. And you go, okay, I'm going to rate these people on a scale. And then, God, what are we going to do with the 7s and the 8s? And how do we? And then he was like, actually, why are we even thinking about that? Why don't we just get rid of everybody below a 9? And then we only think about the 9s and the 10s. And if there's only 3 people there, well, that doesn't matter, because everybody else didn't come up to scratch. And ultimately in that moment, you have then a criteria that tells you who's worth thinking about, who's worth really considering, and who, with all due respect to them, isn't right for this thing. But you've got to have, he would have had to have a way of building that criteria. What makes them right? What makes them an 8 and a 9 and a 10? What makes them a 3? And if you can't do that to your tasks, I mean, let alone, let's not put numbers on people, but if you can't do that to your tasks, you are going to get, shiny object syndrome, which is that classic thing where you've been doing something. How many times have you done a project and it felt like the right project, and you're 75% of the way through, and then something comes up on your feed in LinkedIn, or somebody sends an email about some new idea, or AI comes out of left field, and you go, oh, that's the new thing, and you leave. How many 75% completed projects, do you leave in your wake? And two things there. First of all, like we said, you can't ever learn from anything unless it's completed and out there. So you never really learn from those 75% complete projects. And the second thing is, you don't make any progress towards what you were trying to get to, because if you had in your head this clear idea of this project is going to take me there, but then you'd lost that, you got 75% of the way through the project, and something else pops up that's attracted you, whether you start on something that could also serve that serve that priority, you've got to start from scratch. So you're 75% of the way behind. So this whole task flitting, shiny object syndrome, not completing things, it drags you back. And I've found that the number one way to get over that is literally this priority idea, that if you have one simple, single priority, it just makes everything else easier, because the decisions are already made up ahead in terms of what is worth you doing, what is not worth you doing, what is relevant, what's not relevant. And so if you've got that priority to guide you, then you can put all of your energy into actually doing stuff and finishing stuff, and then assessing it. Did it get me there? Did it progress me in the right way? Should I do this again? And if you can't ask that feedback question, that kind of advanced knowledge question of what worked and what didn't, you just go around in circles.
Right. What's nice about, I think, figuring out those rules and the criteria to be able to make that decision, like what is a 9 on this scale, is that you remove a lot of that decision fatigue, right? Like if it's something just doesn't align with your rules, you just wave it off, and like you don't even have to think about it now. And so you can go spend your mental calories working on something that actually matters. A huge benefit.
This is what drew me into.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this is what drew me into the whole idea, right? Was about 2 or 3 years ago, reading Atomic Habits and getting involved in David Rock's videos and his book, The Brain at Work. And all that stuff is essentially, like you say, it goes down to every time we think, we use calories, we use energy. And I believe that the stat is that the brain is 2% of your body weight, but it uses 20% of the energy. So it's got a massively outsized demand for what you do. And, decisions, like you just said, you get that decision fatigue. It's one of the most intense, energy demanding things you can do. So anything you can do to remove decisions from any equation, from any action, is always going to improve your progress, your ability to focus, everything across the board.
Right. So I guess if we take a step now earlier than just prioritization, we probably need to know what goals we're actually trying, like, are going to drive those priorities. What are you doing in order to help people find out what are their goals? What direction do we actually need to go with our business?
Well, one of the things that people usually get stuck on is this idea of goals. Oh, obsess about my goals. This is where manifestation comes from, isn't it, as well? If I just want it enough, I'll get it. And, regardless of the stories of like Jim Carrey, making things happen, and, we could go right off task and talk about the reticular activation system and how, thinking about something means you see it, all that kind of stuff. Fine, whatever. For me, what's really important is that if you have a goal, there's one thing you definitely also have, and that's a problem. And when you look at goals, usually, me and you, we've got different backgrounds, different career histories, different locations, different living conditions, but we probably have similar goals. And so knowing those goals doesn't really tell us anything. It doesn't tell us what to do next. It doesn't even tell us what to do first. So the most important thing when we look at goals is to realize that probably they're generic, they're non-specific. But when you look at problems, when you look at the thing that stops you getting your goal, the blocker, then you're into ripe territory, because then you can say, well, the reason I haven't got this, the reason I can't get there, the reason I'm not achieving that goal is this, that, and the other. And as soon as you have that conversation with yourself, you immediately know what to do next, what to do first, what to remove. Why am I not fit? Well, because I don't go to the gym. Oh, well, that's the answer, right? Go to the gym. Why am I, not feeling healthy? Because I don't sleep well, I drink lots of alcohol, and I eat unhealthy food. Oh, right. Okay. Now I know exactly what to do. But
Right.
wanting to be fit and wanting to feel healthy are completely generic and unhelpful kind of guides to where you're trying to get to. So for me, what I usually take people through is this sense of there's actually a tool called the herringbone, which is nicely enough for the Viking theme. But all it really is, you can do it very simply. You just draw an arrow from left to right with a big head on the end, a big arrowhead, put your goal on that side. And then what you do is you draw these little fish sort of rib bones that come back. And you're just saying, well, why don't I have that? And why can't I do that? And what's stopping me making that happen? And why isn't that out of my way? And how do I remove that? And it just takes you back down all the way to where you are now. And then essentially you've just planned out exactly how you get to that goal. Now, obviously, you've still got to do the work. But like I say, the most important thing is if you know what you should be doing now, next, and first, you can get so much further than if you just have an idea about where you want to be in a year's time. And so, upending this idea of focusing on your goals to get what you want and actually focusing on the problems that you have that mean you haven't got those goals yet is always going to help you move along. And that's how I start working with people to then draw out that priority. Because at a basic level, okay, I want to have a more successful business. Right, let's spend some time talking about why your agency isn't as successful as it might be. Okay, it's because I'm overworked, I'm stacked with work, I just don't have the time to strategize, to think about where I want to be. Okay, so we can go in two directions then. We can then prioritize reducing the demand on you from work. Maybe we'll try that. Maybe we'll try and systemize some of what you deliver. So it's parts of it are the same every time and you can reuse things and then you've freed up time and headspace. Or on the other side, maybe we look at how you're using your time. Maybe we prioritize the best possible use of your time, the most effective use of your time. And then we know that's a priority to work through. When you look at a task, is this going to help me understand the most effective use of my time? And it's not an exact science. This is why, in a way, it works best on that one-to-one coaching level at first, because we all want to find the thing that, right, that's the answer, that's the silver bullet, and then I run off. And you can do that, but what you often need is a friend or a trusted colleague or a coach to stand there and listen to you and say, yeah, but you said you wanted that this is stopping you. And yet you keep doing the thing that, creates that. So getting that second opinion really, really helps. And ultimately you're trying to get to something that makes, like we said makes decision-making easy so that actions don't have to be involved in decisions. You're just separating those worlds. And then you just test it and see what works.
Yeah. So I really like this herringbone method because once you can start breaking everything down to like those individual pieces, everything is much more manageable. Something I like using are tangible models. And so essentially you create like a math formula for whatever it is. So for example, I had a team member when I was running an agency he felt overwhelmed and it was like to the point where he couldn't work. And so we jumped on a meeting. So, okay, well, what is overwhelm? Right? It's a combination of high demands and a lack of clarity. So can we reduce your demands right now? Is there any projects we can hand off? Right? Is there anything you're not clear of? Let's organize. Let's prioritize. Right? Let's do all these things. You still feel overwhelmed. And like he left that meeting literally saying in these 20 minutes, you got me back onto like, this was everything I needed. But it's like, we couldn't do that if you hadn't identified the problem as like something as simple as feeling overwhelmed. And so I think just that model of being able to break it down like this is genius to quickly advance on your goal, right? Rather than having this large behemoth task. It's like, no, let's just tackle it, right? Like bite by bite.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do Vikings eat bears? Like everybody else, one bite at a time. It's just that iterative process. And I'd love to say I invented the herringbone. Obviously I didn't. But one thing I do feel like I've helped people to get to is because, of course, the question then is, well, how small do you go? How far do you break this down? And so I started playing with this idea that basically you're looking for what I call a step. And I don't usually like acronyms and this cute stuff, but this seemed to work. It's like It's a simple task with everything in place. And if you can go that far down, where, like that guy, okay, I can walk out of this meeting and I've got a step that I can do that requires nothing. I've already got all the stuff together. I don't have to ask anybody for anything. I can just do it. That's the easiest route to getting over procrastination and, overwhelm. When we feel like we can take control, we have agency. That's also a massive, massive way to get over this overwhelm, to get past this distraction that we have. It's like you said, it's clarity. It's uncertainty. And we're living in a pretty incredibly uncertain time. And it's no surprise that procrastination and distraction is on the rise, because not just are we surrounded with the digital items, and obviously if you're in an agency, you're kind of umbilically connected to these things because that's your industry and your life, not just, what happens outside work. It's everything. So you're almost there telling yourself, I've got people who I've worked with, well, I have to look at my phone the first time I wake up in the morning at 6:30 because I'm trying to get ahead of, and it's like, yeah, but what is it doing to you? How much energy are you spending? Can we parcel that up in a more effective time when you're more intentional and, get everything else out of the way with first? And yeah, I think it's just that reduce the decision fatigue, reduce the demands, increase the agency and clarity, and immediately people start to feel more able to get forwards. And then it's like a golden circle, like a virtuous circle. The more you get done, the more you feel like you can get done, and the better you feel, and so the more you can get done. And it just goes on and on.
Right. So let's get into burnout, and I'm very interested in your thoughts because I spent 7 years active duty in the Army, and at no point during that time did I feel burnout. Which, I mean, I was working 70-hour weeks. Some of those weeks were in the field under duress, right? Like not seeing my family, they were miserable. But I never felt burnt. I never felt like I needed a break in order to be able to keep getting the job done. Then I moved into the agency world, and it's like, oh, now I feel like, I could use a break right now. Way less stress, like when you in comparison, right? Just job wise. So what is it about, I get like the passion that you bring into an occupation or something like that affects this? And what are some of those things I guess you should look for to get around it?
I think there's two ways for us to look at that. Like the first way, and I know you're going to agree with me on this, is this idea that when you're in the Army, when you're in that structured environment, downtime isn't seen as downtime. So that phrase, never run when you can walk, never walk when you can sit, never sit when you can lie down. So ultimately, you're in a phase of activation, if you like, where, okay, I have a mission, I have a goal, I have something that I'm doing. That is important. But right now, the best thing that I can do, because I've got a 5-hour wait for a helicopter, or I've got, we've got a 5-hour wait for the rest of the team to catch up with us, I'm then going to recharge myself. And so I think what you probably would agree with is that you recharge whenever possible in the Army. Whereas when you're in a working environment, you're hit with all of these expectations of, we recharge overnight. We recharge when it's dark. We don't recharge at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We don't recharge when we've got a deadline. We don't recharge when we've got suddenly somebody's cancelled a meeting, because we try and shove it in with, if you were in the Army and you're on the front line and your mission is stood down at the very last minute, and you've now got an entire 48 hours of time between your next posting, you don't then go, right, fantastic, we'll go off and we'll do this mission over here. It's not how it works. So I think you probably agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty spot on.
And then on the other side, we're talking about a structured environment. We're talking about, much like, I said, the easy question, the easy answer even at the beginning is just to get employed. Often we know, actually, one of the reasons we don't like to be employed is because we don't get those clear, structured instructions on what to do. And that's why employment can be horrible. But in that structured environment you were in, you knew that priority. You had that filter already applied to the decision making. And also, you had been trained to within an inch of your life, hadn't you? And taken to that point where many of the actions that you took were reflex actions informed by very deep training that were essentially natural actions that you took. So there was no decision making. There was no deliberating. It was act in the moment in response to a predetermined set of, instructions or a predetermined set of expectations. So you were operating in that world where there was huge amounts of uncertainty, but you'd been given all the tools to tackle that uncertainty. Again, in the agency world, a year ago, 2 years ago, it is now, really, isn't it? Nobody could have expected that ChatGPT would suddenly come out of nowhere. Everybody was stuck into their social post writing and scheduling and stuff like that. What platform do you use? What prompts do you use? Prompt meant something completely different, 2 years ago. And then we all wake up during 2023 and not just part of the world has changed, but essentially the whole of the industry has changed. Yeah. And now you have people who are, I hate using the word literally, but literally running businesses that are driven by AI, writing content, putting content out there, and they basically just sort of tame the beast, and say where to go. So you're in a very uncertain situation as well. And yet you don't have the clear guidance. You don't have the structured environment, and nobody's taught you how to respond in that environment. Nobody's given you the drilling. Nobody's given you the reflexes. And when you get down to it, and we can go into it in a minute, one of the key elements of downtime is it is part of our human need for what we actually go through in order to grow and learn and progress. But we deny it because it feels like wasting time, because we're guilty, all that kind of stuff. And so often burnout in an environment like you've described in the agency world, where you're under increasing demand to be on all the time. It's a worldwide market. You can be remote everywhere. So you can have clients anywhere, which means that you can be contacted and need to do anything at any time. And your tools are right there at your fingertips. You can be updating a website or altering a headline in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. And we can tell ourselves we need to do this. Like, we can tell ourselves that this is important. And then when we're actually coming to taking time off and relaxing, unlike when you were in the army, where you can actually put that as a really beneficial, productive, valuable part of your operating procedure, you see it as it's actually apart from your operating procedure. It's a luxury. It's an optional thing. I'll sleep when I'm dead, like Grant Cardone, will always say. And it's nonsense. And it's detrimental. And, as you just said, it's causing burnout. It's causing people to get stuck.
Right. So how can we make recovery productive?
So I think there's a mindset shift, right? That has to be. So basically, the way we learn, it used to be that we believed that you got better at playing the piano by repeatedly playing the piano, by practicing it. We used to think that you got better at speaking a language by literally speaking it to people, by going out of your way to talk that language and think about that language, read that language. Or if you want to develop your business, you're going to get better at it by delivering client work, by overworking, by 60-hour weeks, by just working. That's what's going to get you better. Now, that's part of it, because obviously you've got to do the thing in order to get better at it in some way, but it doesn't actually help in the long run, because it doesn't actually, when we're doing it, isn't actually when it takes place that we learn, that we advance, that we bank, if you like, that progress. So we've discovered, we like I'm a neuroscientist, neuroscience has discovered, and I'm very lucky to have a few very close friends who are neuroscientists. Neuroscience has discovered that actually we learn most, we embed most learning in our brain when we're asleep. In exactly the same way to we build the most muscle, which is in our sleep. But nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that actually, if you sleep, if you rest, if you take downtime, what that is doing is banking all of that progress and hard work that you made before. It's seen as weakness. It's seen as time off. Whereas actually it's still time on. So I think the mind shift is saying, okay, there are 5 gates, and they're called gates because you can't skip any of them. You have to go from 1 to 5. You can't, go from 1 to 4. There are 5 gates of learning. You have to pass through all of them. And the last 2 are what we would typically see as relating to downtime. And if we can get that mindset shift to actually see that I'm not just not doing anything, I'm not just putting my feet up on my bum, what I'm doing is going through the next stage of this learning process, progressing through the gate. And ultimately, burnout happens when you get stuck in the first three gates. Don't mind explaining them in a minute, but I didn't want to get too, like driven into the detail. But the first three gates we will see are very active based, and people get stuck in them. And then you never get through to the final two gates, which are very, in some ways, passive focused. But you can turn them active. And that's part of what I help people to do.
Right. So I guess going into the gates will probably give the answer to one of my next questions, which is how do you remove the guilt from downtime? Where I had a therapist who would just tell me to stop shoulding all over myself, because every time I would sit down to try relaxing, I would go through the process of like, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. And then I couldn't relax and I was wasting my time anyways. But my guess is if you just prioritize your kind of path through these five gates, you can get rid of, like, now you're doing something, right? You should be recovering. These are the steps. You want to go into those five gates?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, stop me if I look like I'm giving COD psychology advice or anything like that, because I don't want to go, into that area. I'm an enthusiast. I'm an evangelist. I'm talking to these people who are studying this their whole lives. And actually, I was introduced to the five gates model by a guy called Dr. John B. Molidor, who's a neuroscientist. I mean, he got his PhD before I was born. So he's been in the area for a long time.
Yeah.
And his explanation of it, there are different terms depending on who you speak to, but the whole of, the kind of studying of it puts him forwards to propose five stages, five gates. The first of which is awareness. So gate one is awareness. And as he says, you can't have any learning, you can't get anything done, you can't change anything without awareness. So in order to learn, we have to know, what do we learn? Why are we learning it? What's missing? And obviously, in order to get shit done, we have to figure out what needs to get done. Why is it going to get done? What will it demand of me? So awareness, if you think of it like the big picture thinking, that's where we were talking about taking your goal, breaking it down into a problem, understanding that priority, and then you've got, that kind of way to move forwards. The second stage is agitation. So gate two, agitation, is the trigger, the motivation. In physiological terms, in kind of inside your brain terms, it's the burst of adrenaline that triggers you to then take action. The reason why you don't just sit there and do nothing. So we always need to be agitated or triggered to actually take action. And a lot of that depends on, it can be a threat. I mean, that's where we come from, as sort of evolution has designed us to respond to threats way more extreme and severely than it has anything else. So we can respond to threats, we can get going, and then that'll move us down the line. So one of the ways you could do that is look at loss aversion. So you want to get down the gym. Okay, so you've done your awareness, you've understood that you need to do this kind of thing at the gym for this kind of result, and you're going to have to go this amount of times. But what's that expression? I think it's in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. The heaviest weight at the gym is the front door. So to get through that front door, you're going to need a trigger. You're going to need a pump. And one of the things you could do is loss aversion, when you say, okay, I'm going to spend 150 quid on a personal trainer who is in the gym, who I have to get to the gym to get my money's worth, and I've already paid the money. I don't want to lose that money. Therefore, I'm prompted to get there. The only trouble with sticks, so that's basically like the stick or the deadline advances. If you keep using sticks, you just get bruises. Okay, so you've got to mix it up. And again, Atomic Habits had a lot of stuff in this about what's called environment design, or what James Clear calls environment design, which is like, you want to go to the gym, then make it incredibly easy. Create the environment that gets you to the gym. When you come into the house, don't sit down, put your gym clothes on. And partly that's because you get worked into the habit, but also our brains are kind of simple. And so you get into that process where the trigger can be as simple as your subconscious going, what's the next natural thing? Well, I'm in my gym clothes. So the next natural thing is I go to the gym. So agitation is a funny one. There's lots of different areas for it, but it's essential. So you then get on to the stage, which is attention. So gate 3, attention. And this is where people really struggle. Probably 2 or 3 reasons. The first reason they struggle is because this is where we go back to what we talked about, getting rid of irrelevant stuff. You've got to be able to focus. You've got to be able to take your attention in a particular direction and sustain it for long enough to actually do something, to get something to happen. So you need focus. And obviously we know that people are struggling with focus right now. So that's where the priority comes in. So I always say to people, always prioritize, never priorities, because that's just the recipe for disaster. So if you have those 3 gates, you have awareness, you have agitation, and then you have attention. Those, as we can see, if you ever got taught how to learn or how to get stuff done, you might have got taught along those lines, something that was useful in those lines. And that's probably where it ended. Because again, we see these as active. The next gate is called reward. And this is where the problem begins. Because, and me and Dr. Molidor have talked about this, and he, kind of talks about it in terms of, we call it reward, but. It's because when we say the word reward, I mean, what do you immediately think of? What do I immediately think of? We think of external factors that, approve us. Accolades, awards, money, attention. And ultimately, we can't control any of that. So whereas we can learn to control the first 3, when we get to reward, the natural feeling anyway, the natural interpretation, we can't control it. So we end up waiting. We end up thinking, oh, long-term rewards, that will keep me going. And this is where we mix up motivation, which has got us going, with momentum, which keeps us going. Momentum is the only thing that can keep you going. And the best way to do that is to move in this gate, to move from outcome goals. I win an award. Somebody, gives me a job. Somebody pays me to do a project. Rather than focus on those and reward those and see those as the outcome, we go to process goals. So we think about, what can I control? What can I turn up and do? How many people can I reach out to and have a conversation with every day? How many events can I take my agency to display what we do? How many tough decisions can I make every week to move us forwards? And then what can I do that isn't reliant on drink or food or money? What can I do to reward myself? And the maddest thing about this is that our brain will respond to something as simple as tally charts, tally marking, going through that, or just a fist bump, or just a yeah in the mirror, and these things, I'm not going to lie, feel silly because we're never taught them and they kind of feel silly. But what you've got a choice, do you be silly and get stuff done, or do you stay embarrassed and get stuck?
Right. That piece right there was a huge struggle for me, where I felt like I always, if I did something good, like I got to a place where I needed to be, I needed to have some sort of reward. And I literally spent time deliberating over, what is this reward? Because I feel like I'm not going to actually advance myself. And one of my coaches just said, like, can't you just congratulate yourself and just like sit there for a minute and be like, good work, and then move on? Cause like, that's really what I want to do. Move to the next thing. So yeah, that was just a huge shift. So now I can sit there for a minute and just be like, hey, you did it. Good job. Next thing, let's go. But let's,
and it can be as simple as thinking about your wins in the week, just writing them down. Yeah. It's just recognition of your efforts. And ultimately that's going to generate satisfaction. And so to go right back, what we're talking about, I know I've talked a lot, but to go right back to what you're talking about, how do we feel less guilty? Well, yeah, first you get the priority. The priority is going to help you get more done. The next thing you do is you get that satisfaction. So you end the week in some way on a high. You plan it, you celebrate it, you get that progress, you recognize it. No matter how small it might be in the bigger picture, you kind of give that reward to yourself, that fist pump, because we are creatures of ritual. And if you've ever worked in an office that then went out on a Friday afternoon for post-work drinks or anything like that, how easy was it to shut down from the week because of those Friday drinks and then to enjoy the weekend? I mean, maybe you had a hangover the next day, but it really felt like the week had ended and the weekend had begun. And so that's what we need at this stage. And that's why the rewards gate is so important, and why us having control over it is so important. Because if you don't finish it, like you said, if you don't have that sense of completion and satisfaction, you're just spinning your heels in those other gates and you can't ever get further forwards.
Right. At the start of this year, I bought a calendar that has all of the days on this like 2-page sheet, and I'll put it to score just 1 through 10. Like how did the day go? And then inside on the monthly like version for each day, I just write down the wins. Like but it's July 16 as of recording this. I've got 6.5 months of just wins in this book. And it's really hard to look back on your year and be like, I wasted my time, when you can see even these little things just stacking.
Yeah.
But let's get into the last gate too. I want to make sure we don't miss that one.
Yeah. So I just want to add very quickly, there's a book called The Confident Mind by Dr. Nate Zinsser, who used to teach at West Point. And he's also worked with top sports people. And one of the things he says is that high performance people don't think about their losses. They don't think about the things they did wrong. So if you have an NHL player practicing, he doesn't think about the times he missed the puck or, didn't get there. What he thinks of are the 1 or 2 times when everything went right and then tries to repeat them. And so that's the mindset. Like you say, that's what we want to get into. So if you get that satisfaction, you've had the priority, which means you can drive yourself forwards. You've had that focus on process goals, which means you can then reward yourself and feel satisfied. Then we're ready to go through to gate 5, which is process. So by that, I mean processing. So it's the end point. It's sleep, it's rest, it's recovery. There's, I'm throwing books out here all over the time, but there's a book called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matt Walker, which terrifying. Absolutely. You got it there.
Yeah, I had it.
Terrifying book.
Counter here.
And it's terrifying because it's so brilliant, because it just undercuts everything we know about sleep or we've been taught about sleep. And it's this gate, this final stage. If you do everything right and then you don't sleep, you've still messed things up. You've still wasted all that time. We need the rewards to tell us we did something that was worth repeating. But we need the processing, we need the recovery, the sleep, to make the repeating of it easier and easier and less energy demanding. And so if you never go through those full 5 gates, you just never get there. You never make that progress, that you never reach the top of the hill. It's Sisyphean, you're always pushing the boulder up the hill and then it rolls back down again just to start all over again. And the drawing to a close is like, this is a cycle. So the awareness stage is so important to get your head above what's going on, but you can't ever get back there if you're stuck in the agitation or the attention phase. You can't get back to that big picture awareness until you've gone through the next gates, the reward and the process. But as soon as you've done that, and so getting into Friday and then having the weekend is perfect for that, because then you begin Monday with, right, back in awareness. That might only take 5 minutes because you might already have it all detailed. But I'm back in awareness. I can take the bigger picture. Have I gone in the right direction? Yes. Have I not? Course correct. Right. I'm back into agitation and attention again. And when I when I was introduced to that model, that was when I was like, oh my God, I've been looking for something like this my entire life, because it just tells you everything about what's wrong about the way we're taught to learn and grow and, make things happen. And yet at the same time, it can be so simple to make it work. And all you've got to do is get into that rhythm and that ritual. I say all.
Right. So if we're looking at just like a standard week, I guess probably most people in the corporate world, right, are going to fall into the 5 work days, 2 weekends. Do you recommend more of a sprint through those 5 days, get your stuff in so that you can just focus on completely shut down for those 2 days? Or is it more of a, no, let's do this every day. Let's find ways to incorporate that recovery so that we can, even if you do have to work on the weekend, like it's not going to take such a huge hit on you because you're continuously just recharging your engine.
I think it's important to kind of say, first of all, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm basing my work on, the information that I get from friends, and I've checked it out with them and we've gone backwards and forwards. And so it's all sort of weaponized, if you like, from knowledge. And ultimately, what you realize when you do that kind of thing is that that means that, like you were saying, the enemy gets a vote, the world gets a vote. So there's no answer that can be, this is how you apply this system. You just do this. You just do this. Now, if you're in an employed situation, yes, there might be a good structure because there's already a 9 to 5 structure in many cases. Obviously, that's changing now. But one of the things that I experienced way back in my first job, so I used to be a video games journalist on a magazine, and we would have a routine where every month you're working towards that deadline. Now, the last week of the month, certainly the last 3 or 4 days of the month, when you were working towards the copy deadline, was always crushed, was always tight. We were always in late. But what we did, as soon as the magazine was sent, we were then out celebrating. We were ready to, and then we came back in and it was a slower start. So on that way, there was a big kind of monthly long cycle that we could get used to. Whereas when we're self-employed, one of the reasons that, no doubt many of your listeners started their agencies or took over their agencies is because they don't want to just do a 9 to 5 regular life. They want flexibility. If they want to take Wednesday afternoon off, they do. If they want to work a bit late on Saturday, they do. And it's about, first of all, accountability, where I come in, accountability on making those decisions. Do you know what you're trading off? Do you know why you're doing it? So you obviously got that priority in mind. The other side of it is just saying you've got to be aware of where you're at. So I had a speaking engagement. I ran a workshop a few weeks ago. It's the first one I'd done in a while, and it was new content. And so it was all brand new. And then the next day, I tried to get some work done in the morning and got some reflex actions, some routine actions done in the morning. But by about 10 or 11 o'clock, I was like, if I carry on like this, I'm going to be wiped. I am in the end of that heavy attention phase. I've just done something. I need to reward myself. I need to celebrate it because at the moment I'm hung up. I'm not moving forwards. So I did that. I went to the cinema for the afternoon, just had a little bit of time out, really, thought about the wins, thought about what went well with the workshop. And then I had, a really restful afternoon into the evening, got up in the morning. The next day, wow, I'm raring to go. So it can happen on as short a time period as sort of 48 hours or probably even 24 hours, or as long a period as a month or however long you want to go, and probably many different ways inside of that, because we're not talking about just one big cycle. We're talking about, multi-cycles going on at the same time. The key is just to listen to yourself and say, okay, yeah, I need to rest right now, but I'm feeling like I can't. Okay, that probably means because I'm stuck at this reward phase. I need to go through that gate. I need to recognize where I've actually got to. There was a study in an airport a few years ago where they went through the airport lounge. They interviewed about a few thousand people about them going on holiday. And they had some crazy number, 60, 70+% of people had fear of switching off. They were afraid of switching off. And I've spoken to agency owners who have taken, obviously, their laptops on holiday. I've got people telling me that their partners are like, if that phone rings one more time, it's going in the sea. They're out in Barbados or Tenerife or somewhere beautiful and they're still working. Why is that? Partly because they can't let go. And they probably can't let go because they haven't found that division, because they haven't gone through the gates. And partly it might also be that they're not confident that when they come back, things are going to be doable, copable, that something's going to go wrong when they're away. And so you've got to kind of be aware of like, what do I need right now? Is it some more action to put in place, like a proper handover or whatever? Do I need to build up trust with somebody? Is that something? Is that my big picture awareness that I need to build up trust and go through this phase? Or is it just I'm stuck in a gate and I need to go through what that gate needs so that I can get to the other side?
Right. So I've got one critical question for you that I will probably never ask another guest. What is that one lesson that you wish agency founders pulled from the Vikings?
So one of the things we think about when we think about Vikings is violence, pillaging, invasion. But actually, the key thing about the Vikings were they were masters of navigation. They built their boats in an entirely unique way. And actually, anybody who knows boats, I don't know them very well, but I know this, anybody who knows boats will tell you that the Viking design was so sophisticated because whereas other boats of the same time created a lot of friction and were very heavy and low down in the water when they were traveling, Viking boats sat up much higher in the water, and they split their wood in such a way that it trapped air between the water and the boat, and it reduced the friction massively. So they could travel incredible speeds, and they could also maneuver up through streams and rivers that other boats couldn't get to. And so they had this kind of technology awareness, but that was really driven by their desire to navigate into unknown territory, their desire to go and explore the world. There are very few, certainly of the time, there are very few races or tribes, collections of the time that spread themselves so widely with so much interest in what actually was happening and borrowed so widely from what was going on around them as the Vikings. And I think ultimately, if you're going to take anything from it, it's that sense of navigation. In order to navigate, even from Denmark and Finland and Sweden and Norway, even to navigate from there to the English islands, they had to go through fatal, sometimes, conditions, deathly conditions. So they had to know what they were doing. They had to have a clear path that they were following. They had to be really clued in to everything that was going on around them. And they had to have that single priority, that guiding force that enabled them to tack with the wind, to move the boat in the right way, to prepare themselves for what was coming. And it was all because they knew exactly what they were trying to achieve. And maybe if I can get a bonus second one, it's that they knew how to have fun. They really knew how to have fun. They knew how to celebrate and enjoy their victories. And, that's certainly something to take out of their book as well.
Awesome. All right. This is a great conversation. I got two more questions for you that I do ask every guest. With the first being, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
So, I've thrown out so many there. Yeah. I think probably it has to be to back up everything I've said and show you that, I know it sounds like an idyll that you've got to get more rest, but to back it all up, it has to be Why We Sleep by Dr. Matt Walker, because if you get through that and you're not terrified and you're not immediately changing your sleeping routine, then there's no hope for you. What he says is a practical and, information just dense about the benefits of it. And if you need if you need any reason to not feel guilty about taking downtime, it's all in that book.
Awesome. Last question. Where can people learn more about you?
Best place is LinkedIn. So I am the Accountability Viking on LinkedIn. If you just do LinkedIn and then, the /Accountability Viking, you can find me there. You can also, I think if you just put Accountability Viking into Google, I'm coming up with some of my speaking dates and my Instagram maybe and stuff like that. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me. If you want to see my in progress website, which is always in progress because it's not a priority right now, it's getshitdone.fun.
Thank you for joining, Ben. This was you're the only Viking who's been on the show. So
good.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.